Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, September 11th, 2024. All right, so first thing, I just watched the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I think I saw all the foreign policy stuff, and it was kind of what I expected. You know, Gaza was very briefly touched on. I mean, there's basically no daylight between the two on supporting Israel's slaughter there. Trump accused Harris of hating Israel and said that if she's elected, Israel won't exist in 2 years. She also said something, too, that all the Arabs are going to get bombed. And then Harris said, no, I've supported Israel my whole life, blah, 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 all that. Typical, you know, I'm going to support Israel's right to self-defense, which means continuing to fund this genocidal war in Gaza. And they're also funding the operations in the West Bank, escalations in Lebanon and all that. Ukraine, Trump said some good things about Ukraine. He was asked about the war. He said, I want to get, he said a similar line before, basically said, I want it to end. I want the killing to stop, saying he's going to negotiate a deal. Of course, Harris was accusing him of loving dictators or whatever. And then another thing Trump said, he was bragging about how he sanctioned the Nord Stream pipeline, and he said, when Biden came in, he let it, the Nord Stream pipelines go through, but I mean, the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up under Biden, so maybe not the best line of attack, but, and again, that was a big thing Trump was saying, is that, none of this would have happened if I was president. That's kind of his main argument. So again, it was just tough to watch. It's just a very sorry state of affairs when it comes to the foreign policy stuff. When it comes to the stuff happening in Gaza, it just seems like there's going to be no relief. I mean, I have to watch it again when I write a story on it. But Harris was asked, you say that you want a ceasefire, but all these people are killed. What are you going to do for a ceasefire? And she didn't really answer the question. So, I don't expect much of anything out of her that would be different related to what's happening in Gaza. All right, so to get into all of this other news that we have, it was a really busy day. The first story at the top of antiwar.com today, the U.S. may support long-range strikes in Russia. So Representative Michael McCaul, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, believes the Biden administration will lift restrictions on Ukraine's use of U.S. missiles to allow long-range strikes inside Russian territory, which would mark another significant escalation of the proxy war. So McCaul made these comments ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's next visit to Ukraine, which will take place on Wednesday. And Blinken will be joined by his British counterpart, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy. So Ukraine has been using U.S. missiles and other weapons in its invasion of Kursk and has been pushing for the use of the longer range weapons, which include the Army Tactical Missile Systems, or the ATACMS. They have a range of up to 190 miles. They also want to use the British Storm Shadow missiles, which have a range of about 155 miles. So McCaul, his quote is kind of confusing, so I'm not going to read it. But essentially what he said is that based on the conversations that he had with Blinken, he expects them to sign off on these long-range strikes. So actually, I will read the quote. So this is McCaul. He said, quote, Blinken's as supportive as I am, and he just said, so this is McCaul quoting Blinken now, I have some good news. I'm going to Ukraine with my counterpart from the UK to talk about ATACMS. And what I've seen and what I've been briefed on, it looks like that's the message they're going to give them, that they can use them cross-border, end quote. And that's so he kind of, it's confusing when the Blinken quote started and ended, but essentially what McCaul is saying is that Blinken said, hey, I'm going to go talk about ATACMS with the Ukrainians, and I think we're probably going to give them the okay to use the ATACMS. So, and I think this goes to show Blinken is on board. Blinken wants this escalation. We saw Lloyd Austin the other day kind of push back on it. This seems to be another case of the State Department, of the diplomats, the supposed diplomats, being more hawkish and reckless than the Pentagon and the military. This is a common theme that we've seen in the Biden administration and in kind of recent administrations. So McCall joined a group of other Republicans. They sent a letter to Biden on Monday telling them to lift the restrictions. So not a good sign here. I thought that stuff from Austin the other day was a sign that they weren't going to approve this right away, but we'll see. Russia has warned strongly against the U.S. allowing Ukraine to use NATO weapons to hit targets deep inside Russia and said that it is changing. It's working on changing its nuclear doctrine in response to Western escalation. So that is concerning, the fact that Russia is saying they're going to change their nuclear doctrine in response to these escalations. So this goes to show how serious this is. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine launches major drone attack on Russia, killing one civilian. So on Tuesday, Ukraine launched a major drone attack on Russia that targeted Moscow and several other Russian regions, killing at least one civilian. The civilian who was killed was a 46-year-old woman in a town in the Moscow Oblast. Moscow Governor Andrei Vorobyev said that she died when the debris of a Ukrainian drone that was downed by Russian air defenses hit her high-rise apartment building. He said a total of 2 apartment buildings were hit, setting fire to several apartments. According to an Al Jazeera reporter in Moscow, 12 people were injured by the attack, and this marks the largest Ukrainian attack on Moscow of the war. And you see the picture here, the damage done to this high-rise apartment building. So the Russian Defense Ministry said that its air defenses downed a total of 144 Ukrainian drones, including 20 over Moscow and 72 over Bryansk. So this is a big attack. As far as I remember, this is the biggest, most drones that I've seen Russia say that Ukraine launched into Russian territory. So this might be the biggest Ukrainian drone attack of the war. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. accuses Iran of supplying Russia with ballistic missiles. So the U.S. on Tuesday formally accused Iran of providing Russia with ballistic missiles and imposed new sanctions on Russian-flagged ships allegedly involved in the weapons transfers. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the new sanctions at a press conference in London with his British counterpart, David Lammy. The U.S. also imposed new sanctions on Iran's main airline. Those aren't expected to have any impact, really, since that airline is already under U.S. sanctions. For their part, Iran is denying these reports that it's been sending ballistic missiles to Russia. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said, quote, "The publication of false and misleading reports about the transfer of Iranian weapons to some countries is simply an ugly propaganda to conceal the large illegal arms support of the United States and some Western countries for the genocide in Gaza. Some Western countries present themselves as defenders of human rights and support the implementation of international conventions and treaties, but send all kinds of weapons to back the war crimes of the Zionist regime," end quote. And it is something to see the U.S. sanctioning a country for sending missiles to another country. I mean, think about how many missiles and bombs the U.S. is shipping around the world. Blinken said that the U.S. had warned Iran that providing missiles to Russia would be a dramatic escalation. So, again, it's a dramatic escalation. The U.S. has been dumping missiles and cluster bombs and all sorts of things into Ukraine. So in recent years, Russia and Iran, they have been increasing their military and economic cooperation, which is a natural response to U.S. and other Western sanctions that have targeted both nations. All right, so the next story here, Biden backs Israel's claim on the Americans shot in the West Bank. So the Israeli military on Tuesday said that it was highly likely one of its soldiers shot and killed an American activist in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, but claimed that it was indirect and unintentional despite it being a headshot. And this claim was later backed by President Biden. So Aishanur Izi-Agi, 26-year-old, she was killed on September 6th while protesting illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank village of Baita. Her family responded to the Israeli military statement, calling it wholly inadequate. The family said that they were, quote, deeply offended by the suggestion that her killing by a trained sniper was in any way unintentional. The disregard for human life in this inquiry is appalling, end quote. So later in the day, after the family put out that statement, Biden was asked about this, and this is what he said. Quote, apparently it was an accident. It ricocheted off the ground, and she got hit by accident. I'm working that out now, end quote. So just completely buying the Israeli story. You just think of any other country, a situation like this, that the U.S. would respond like this. I mean, it's just so pathetic. It shows how his deference to Israel and these things that you hear from Trump and other Republicans that, the Biden administration abandoned Israel or that they hate Israel. I mean, it's just a complete joke. It's just completely unserious. And then the statement from Aigie's family added that the shooting, quote, cannot be misconstrued as anything except a deliberate, targeted, and precise attack by the military against an unarmed civilian, end quote. So the Israeli military claimed that the shot that killed her was not aimed at her, but at a key instigator of a riot. But all the eyewitnesses said that the protesters were peaceful, especially her. She was apparently in an olive grove when she was hit and killed. So just another Israeli crime against an American that doesn't look like there's going to be any accountability for. All right, so the next one here, Israel lobbies Congress to pressure South Africa on genocide case. So this article is from Brett Wilkins. Israeli officials are lobbying U.S. lawmakers to pressure South Africa into dropping its genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, according to a report published Monday. Axios said that it obtained a classified Israeli Foreign Ministry cable sent Monday to the country's embassy in Washington, D.C., and all its U.S. consulates threatening consequences if South Africa proceeds with its case, which is backed by dozens of nations and regional blocs, as well as countless legal and genocide experts. The cable says, quote, we are asking you to immediately work with lawmakers on the federal and state level with governors and Jewish organizations to put pressure on South Africa to change its policy towards Israel and to make clear that continuing their current actions like supporting Hamas and pushing anti-Israeli moves in international courts will come with a heavy price, end quote. So that's what the foreign ministry is telling the Israeli diplomats in the U.S. to do. Get Congress to pressure South Africa. All right, so the next one here, the Israeli military rejects Netanyahu's claim on the Philadelphi corridor. So the Israeli military establishment has found no evidence that Hamas might try to smuggle hostages out of Gaza into Egypt through the Philadelphi corridor, despite claims from Netanyahu. Haaretz reported this on Tuesday. So Netanyahu recently made the claim that Hamas could smuggle hostages to Iran through Egypt to justify his demand that Israel must maintain control of the Philadelphi corridor. But Israeli media reported that military officials don't think Hamas has the capability to smuggle hostages into Egypt, let alone another country. So Netanyahu's demand for the Philadelphi corridor has been the main obstacle to a hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas. The Israeli military does not believe that condition is necessary for a temporary ceasefire deal. Netanyahu's efforts to sabotage the chances of a hostage deal have been widely reported by Israeli media and acknowledged by Israeli officials, but the U.S. is still pinning all the blame on Hamas for the lack of a deal. The Times of Israel reported that the U.S. is at odds with Egypt and Qatar over who is at fault. And this disagreement is so profound that Egypt and Qatar, which have been mediating the negotiations, are thinking about putting out a joint statement, making it clear that Israel is the one that's impeded the chances of a deal. So on Monday, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that there was a strategic opportunity for a hostage deal with Hamas. He's making a call for a deal, but he said it's only going to be temporary and that Israel will have the right to resume things after the 6-week pause, which would be the first part of the deal. So that even if a deal does happen, the U.S., Israel have been making it clear that it's only going to be temporary, the ceasefire. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills another 32 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So Gaza's health ministry said Tuesday that Israel's assault on the besieged territory killed at least 32 more Palestinians in the previous 24-hour period. The latest killings bring the ministry's death toll to 41,020, and the number of Palestinians wounded in Gaza since October 7th has reached 94,925 people. The numbers don't include the 10,000 Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble, and don't account for indirect deaths. So the 32 killed included 19 who were killed by Israeli strikes on the Al-Mawasi tent camp for displaced Palestinians, which has been designated a so-called humanitarian zone by the Israeli military, but has been repeatedly targeted. So yesterday I covered this strike. Look at this crater. I mean, it shows that they use very heavy bombs in these strikes on this tent camp. They bombed tents using stuff this heavy. So when this was first reported, I covered it yesterday. Gaza rescue workers said that at least 40 people were killed. Later on, the health ministry put the death toll at 19, and that was based on the number of bodies being brought to the hospital. So they said that number could rise since there's still people buried and trapped in this camp. So they're saying that the death toll is 19. Again, it could increase, but 40 was the initial estimate, I guess, from the rescue workers that were at the scene. And it goes to show that the health ministry's numbers are, they count the bodies. They're not just counting, estimating and guessing. Where were we here? Survivors of the Israeli attack on the Al-Mawasi camp said many women and children were killed and wounded. One survivor said, quote, "We saw women cut in pieces, children cut in pieces, and martyrs. There are still people missing. People are looking for them, and they still have not found them yet," end quote. Israel claimed that it targeted Hamas commanders and a Hamas command center, but offered no evidence for the claim. Hamas denied that its fighters were in the tent camp. Hamas said in a statement, quote, "This is a clear lie that aims to justify these ugly crimes. The resistance has denied several times that any of its members exist within civilian gatherings or use these places for military purposes," end quote. So, more deaths. So the death toll has gone over 41,000 now, the number that the health ministry is putting out. All right, so the next one here, annexation, expulsion, and settlements, the next phase of the Gaza war. So this is an article from Haaretz, and it's an analysis that is predicting Israel might start establishing settlements in northern Gaza pretty soon, and it's written by Aluf Ben is the author. So it says, Israel is entering the second phase of its war in Gaza when it will strive to complete its takeover of the northern Gaza Strip from the previous border to the Netzarim corridor. We can predict that this area will then gradually be made available for Jewish settlement and annexation to Israel, according to the degree of international outcry that such steps might incur. If that happens, Palestinian residents who remain in northern Gaza will be expelled, as suggested by Major General Giora Island, who's a retired IDF general, under the threat of starvation and under cover of protecting their lives while the Israeli military hunts down Hamas. So essentially saying that they're going to expel the Palestinians from northern Gaza. And, this is something I think it's been clear that this is what the goal is for Israel. And going way back to October 2023, which this is almost a year ago now, there was a leaked Israeli intelligence ministry document that said the best case scenario for Israel is if we can expel all 2.3 million Palestinians into Egypt. And they said that they would start by evacuating northern Gaza and getting complete control of northern Gaza. And the Netzarim corridor is that area that separates northern Gaza from the rest of the strip. So they're set up to kind of just slowly conquer the north, and either kill or expel the Palestinians there. This is something that we've been talking about a lot is you see Israeli officials and ministers and members of the Knesset talking about Jewish settlements in Gaza, that they want to start building them. And now this Haaretz author thinks that this is going to be the part of the next phase here. So it might happen sooner than I expected. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strike kills Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. This one is from Jason Ditz. Mohammed Qasem al-Shar, a commander in Hezbollah's elite Radwan force, has been reported killed today in an Israeli drone strike on his motorcycle near Kararun in the western Bekaa Valley of eastern Lebanon. I always pronounce the Lebanon towns wrong. I need to work on that. But anyway, so this was on Tuesday, and this was one of multiple Israeli strikes on Tuesday with attacks also reported in other areas of southern Lebanon. So, the Israeli strikes continue. 2 bystanders were wounded in the strike, and other strikes were reported in 4 villages that Jason mentions here. So it seems like pretty heavy airstrikes. And I didn't see reports of Hezbollah rocket fire, but typically it's kind of tit for tat. All right, so the next one here, 2 girls reported killed in a U.S. strike in Yemen. So Yemeni media reported Tuesday that a joint U.S.-British airstrike struck near a school in a Houthi-controlled area of Yemen's Taiz province, killing 2 female students and wounding 9 more. So far, the U.S. military has not claimed any strikes in Yemen on Tuesday, as of the time that I published this. A day earlier, U.S. Central Command said that it struck Yemen and claimed it destroyed 2 Houthi missile systems and 1 support vehicle. So the U.S. has kept up a heavy bombing campaign in Yemen since January, which has only escalated the situation in the Red Sea. And so we see Yemeni media here reporting this as a joint U.S.-British strike. That's kind of the way they've been reporting all the U.S. strikes. The UK has joined the U.S. in several rounds of heavy airstrikes in Yemen. But for the most part, these have been unilateral U.S. strikes. So I would guess that this was probably just the U.S. But details, we don't have many details about this. The Houthis have condemned the strike. A Houthi official, Mohammed Abdul Salam, said, quote, "Targeting civilians and educational facilities is a dangerous escalation that reflects the American and British frustration due to their failure to protect Israeli navigation in the Red Sea," end quote. So I haven't seen this outside of Houthi and Yemeni media, except for Al Mayadeen, which is a Lebanese outlet that has correspondents in Yemen. They said that one of their correspondents confirmed that the strike killed 2 girls. Tomorrow, I'm probably going to ask U.S. Central Command about this, see if they say anything, or we'll see if CENTCOM puts out a statement. But there's just such little attention, and nobody cares about Yemenis being killed that this probably won't get too much attention or coverage in the Western media. But I'll try to follow up on it and see if we could get confirmation of it and figure it out. I know the Yemen Data Project, they put out kind of monthly reports on the strikes in Yemen, so they would cover this in their update next month. All right, so that's it for the news. Actually, we have one more story here, the war crimes that the military buried. So I haven't looked through this whole thing yet. This is from the New Yorker, and it is a database of possible American war crimes committed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it shows that the military justice system rarely punishes perpetrators. So there's an article discussing it, but if you scroll down, they have all these different cases of war crimes, of alleged war crimes, 151 cases in different countries, and you could search through it. Just here, this one that they have at the top, killing of Mohammed Sayara at a roadblock. So on August 28th, 2002, an Army Special Forces team allegedly killed Mohammed Sayara, an Afghan civilian, at a roadblock they'd set up near a fire base. According to investigation records, the soldiers lured him into an ambush, captured him, and then shot him to death. Afterward, they allegedly destroyed photos of the body. So let's see. The alleged perpetrators, there was 5 alleged perpetrators in this killing. One of them was disciplined at some sort of administration discipline, and then the other 4, no action was taken against them for this killing. So it's an interesting thing to kind of look through. So that's it for the news. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from JD Hester. Cheney backs Harris. Warhawk's blessing reveals continuity in foreign policy. At one point in the debate, Kamala Harris said, "Oh, Dick Cheney, all these Republicans, including Dick Cheney, endorsed me." It's like, man, it's amazing to see a Democrat say that as like a positive thing. even though, I mean, things are so much different now. But one from Ted Snyder, as Ukraine declines, Zelensky shuffles his cabinet. One from William J. Astori, from the arsenal of democracy to the arsenal of genocide. One from Edward Hunt, U.S. maintains military grip over sovereign Pacific Island states. One from Abdal Jawad Omar, testing the boundaries for ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. Please go check all of that out. We actually have some very, very good news in the blog today. Kyle Anzalone, our opinion editor, his wife gave birth to Ariella Anzalone, little girl, on Tuesday. So that's very exciting. So congratulations to Kyle. He's going to be out for a little while, obviously, but at least there's some good in the world, And this is the, I didn't realize until I started recording that it's 9/11 when this is released. It's going to be the anniversary of September 11th. I haven't prepared anything to say about 9/11, but, it is just, you look at over the past what year is it? It's 2024, so it's the 23rd anniversary, and just all of the destruction and death in the Middle East, and since then committed by the U.S. using 9/11 as the pretext. They're still using, war authorizations. The 2002 AUMF, or sorry, the one that they passed right after 9/11 to invade Afghanistan. That's what they used to justify the presence in Iraq and Syria and Somalia. It's completely ridiculous. But anyway, so that's it. I'm going to write something up on that debate. It was just, it was tough to watch. But anyway, that's it for me. If you want to support this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com. Share, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I appreciate everyone who does, everyone who listens and watches this show. I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.